excessive or unnecessary force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, or the use of offensive language. The board itself is made up of 15 members whose appointments are meant to reflect New York City in all its diversity. 5 members are appointed by the mayor, 5 are appointed by this council, 3 are designated by the police commissioner and approved by the mayor. 1 is appointed by the public advocate. The chair is jointly appointed by the mayor and the speaker of the city council. The agency's entirely civilian staff investigates complaints, gathers evidence, interviews witnesses and officers, and then shares the results of that investigation with the board. The board reviews the investigation and meets to determine whether or not to substantiate allegations of misconduct. In cases where the board substantiates misconduct, it recommends discipline. Those findings and recommendations are then transmitted to the police commissioner, who retains the final authority on all disciplinary matters for New York City Police Department officers. In the most serious cases of alleged misconduct, the CCRB's Administrative Prosecution Unit, the APU, will prosecute an administrative trial. The NYPD's Deputy Commissioner for Trials and her team preside over these trials. The results of those trials are also transmitted to the police commissioner for her final decision. The scale of the work this agency cannot be overstated. We measure our work in complaints and allegations. A complaint is an incident where a civilian believes misconduct occurred. An allegation describes a possible violation of part of the NYPD patrol guide. Complaints may contain more than one allegation and involve more than one subject officer. In 2025, the CCRB received 5,617 complaints, the second highest number of complaints in a decade. It received 22,172 specific allegations. Of those, the agency fully investigated 2,070 complaints and 14,953 allegations. Our investigation substantiated 987 complaints and 3,173 allegations against 1,357 individual members of service. That means the CCRB substantiated 21.22% of the allegations we fully investigated. Put another way, the CCRB substantiated at least one allegation in 47.68% of the complaints we fully investigated. New Yorkers have the right to report allegations of police misconduct to this agency, and it is a right that New Yorkers have been exercising with increased frequency in recent years. Whether a complaint is substantiated or not, the CCRB's job is to treat that complaint seriously and find the truth. We owe this to civilians and police officers. The increase in complaints outpaced the CCRB's capacity to respond to complaints in a timely manner. In 2025, on average, it took 432 days to close a fully investigated case. This is the fastest average time to close a fully investigated complaint in 5 years, but it is still too long. In order for our system of public safety to work for everyone, both civilians and police officers, it is vital that the CCRB be given the resources to ensure all complaints can be investigated in a timely fashion and that the evidence can be followed wherever it leads. To that end, the agency's budget request for fiscal year 2027 would provide enough funding to support all of its functions as an independent police oversight agency. $65,094,437 and an authorized agency headcount of 500 people. This is an increase of roughly $36 million and 233 staff members over the enacted FY26 budget. It represents less than 1% of the New York City Police Department's overall budget and headcount. If this request was granted in full, the agency would have roughly 500 people to oversee the work of 35,000 sworn members of service. We believe this is what a fully funded agency would look like. Historically, the CCRB has been underfunded and under-resourced. Changes to the city charter gave additional authority and responsibilities to the agency, including investigating allegations of untruthful statements, as well as racial profiling and bias-based policing allegations. The changes to the charter also gave the agency the power to initiate investigations without having received a complaint. This tension between resources and obligations led the agency to make difficult decisions to prioritize where and how to use the resources at our disposal. On January 1st, 2024, the CCRB implemented a policy we call the Strategic Resource Allocation Determination, or ESRAD. This policy was enacted due to the shortage of investigators as compared to the increased number of complaints the CCRB received. Under this policy, certain types of allegations of misconduct were closed as unable to investigate when they were not part of a larger complaint. In 2025 alone, roughly 1,390 complaints were closed under ESRAD. ESRAD is unfair to both officers and civilians. When misconduct is alleged, it helps no one to leave these allegations uninvestigated. If the incident represents a violation of the NYPD Patrol Guide, the civilian should know that the officer was held accountable. If the incident was not a violation, the officer deserves to know they acted appropriately, and the civilian deserves an explanation. This is how the CCRB as an institution would build trust. Being unable to investigate allegations due to budgetary constraints harms all parties. While the increased budget from fiscal year 2026 enabled the CCRB to reduce the scope of ESRAD, we were unable to eliminate it entirely. That is why we are requesting a full budget today to ensure we are able to investigate every complaint we receive that is within our jurisdiction. Despite a lack of funding and increases to the agency's jurisdiction, as well as to the number of complaints, the quality of the CCRB investigations improved. In fact, we increased the number of fully investigated cases in which we provided a finding on the merits. What does this mean? In 2025, the agency closed just 16.2% of allegations in fully investigated complaints as unable to determine, the lowest percentage on record. Body-worn cameras factor importantly in this trend, as they provide key evidence that allows the agency to resolve more complaints than ever before on the merits. We've also made efficiency a key agency goal for 2026, soliciting feedback from our entire workforce to uncover new ways to be better in our work each day. Efficiency alone is not enough to respond to the scale of the work our agency faces each year. To do that, we need additional staffing, and our budget request captures those needs. The investigations unit makes up the bulk of our workforce. They carry out the day-to-day work of fact-finding and interviewing. This unit requires an additional 86 staff spread across several investigator roles in order to fully address New Yorkers' complaints. These are some of the most critical positions in the agency. Filling them is essential to meeting our duties under the city charter. Additionally, the increased overall number of investigators would allow the workload to be spread across a much wider base of staff, shortening overall investigation timelines. An efficient CCRB isn't only able to investigate more cases, it's also able to do so more quickly. When this council directed the CCRB to investigate racial profiling and bias-based policing allegations, it also funded the creation of a team to conduct those investigations. These investigations require specialized training and a different workflow from our general investigations. That team currently has 27 staff members, but is in need of an additional 37 positions to fully meet our responsibilities under the city charter, including managers, supervisors, and investigators. In 2012, the CCRB signed a memorandum of understanding with the NYPD to establish the Administrative Prosecution Unit, or APU. The APU prosecutes the most serious cases of alleged misconduct at administrative trials before an NYPD trial commissioner. As of now, this unit has 23 staff. It needs 2 additional positions to help handle the workload associated with administrative trials. The additional support will further increase efficiency and reduce timelines associated with these cases. The CCRB's outreach unit is the face of the CCRB for many New Yorkers. They go into communities, schools, gyms, barbershops, and everywhere New Yorkers gather to explain how the CCRB works and how to file a complaint. Their vital work includes initiatives such as CCRB Courtside, where we interact with New Yorkers on basketball courts and at other organized sporting events. CCRB Cares, where we partner with community organizations during charitable activities, such as community cleanups and food pantries. This unit requires 8 new staff to spread the word across all 5 boroughs about the work of the CCRB. Communicating with New Yorkers is a key responsibility for any agency within city government, but is especially true for the CCRB. Many New Yorkers are unaware of the CCRB and their rights in an interaction with police officers. For this reason, the agency needs to be supported in its efforts to perform targeted engagement with a diverse group of New Yorkers. Excuse me. These efforts share information about how to file a complaint, and providing this type of information to the public where they are can help increase overall trust in the system of public safety. This makes New York safer for everyone, police and civilians alike. Beyond these core areas, the agency has many needs in our other support offices, whether it's new attorneys to support our Office of the General Counsel, new specialists to help our Human Resources Department, or new information technology that provide less visible work, but no less important work, to help the agency operate and fulfill its mission. I also want to reiterate the importance of having a fully staffed board. We currently only have 11 of the required 15 board member positions filled. The lack of a full complement of board members impacts our work, slowing the overall time it takes to reach a conclusion in an investigation. In 2025, fully investigated cases had to wait an average of 156 days before being reviewed by a board panel. This delay is directly related to the lack of a full board and burdens the civilians and police officers who are waiting to see the results of CCRB investigations. Filling all board member positions would be a simple and effective way to increase the agency's efficiency. The work of the CCRB is essential to assure accountability for the members of the New York City Police Department. That is why Mayor David Dinkins supported the transition of the CCRB into the independent agency it is today. That is why the staff tirelessly performs the work they do, day in and day out. The CCRB is the gold standard against which police review boards across the nation are measured. With the support of this council, I believe we can do even better.
All right. Thank you so much for your testimony, and thank you for being here. So I have a few questions, and also obviously thank you for all the work you do in investigating police misconduct cases, including and especially in areas like the Bronx, area that has been affected by that. A few questions regarding headcount and also funding requests. Specifically, I want to ask about the new needs request submitted by the board. If approved, this would increase the board's budget by approximately 150%, right?
Correct.
How are you evaluating whether a quick, substantial increase or a slow, gradual increase is the best way to approach this issue?
It's a very interesting question, Mr. Chair. The request is the agency's best estimate as to what the needs of the agency are to do our work. And that is investigate all of the complaints that come before our agency that are within our jurisdiction as quickly as possible. We've taken steps to make sure that should the request be granted, we are able to hire up and then have places for people to work once we get that funding.
And this is, by the way, a conversation that we've been having with almost every single agency, hiring, retaining, and et cetera. So if your budget request is approved, what are recruitment initiatives that you would implement to quickly fill those positions?
So the CCRB hasn't had a dedicated recruiter in several years. We have just identified one, and we're hoping to onboard them in the next month. And using the recruiter, we're really going to focus on local CUNY universities to bring in the new investigators that we're going to need to staff up, not just CUNY, but also all around the city.
You somewhat mentioned this in your testimony, but what are areas and investigations you're unable to complete due to the budget restrictions, and also what are areas that you would be interested or prioritizing in terms of expansions?
So the strategic resource allocation determination, since we've enacted it in 2024, has impacted 3,473 complaints. In 2026 alone, there have been 199 cases in which we've had to close without any investigation. So the original policy included complaints that either only had the following one of the following allegations or some combination of just these allegations. Forcible removal to the hospital, of which there were 175 in 2024. Threats, refusal to process a civilian complaint about a member of the NYPD, and the underlying complaint was not a CCRB complaint. Failure to provide right-to-know act cards. Property seizures involve refusal to provide name or refusal to provide a shield number, discourteous words or actions, and untruthful statements. As a result of the council's increase to the agency's budget in FY26, at the start of this year, the CCRB removed forcible removal to the hospital from the ESRAD policy. So we are now investigating allegations of forcible removal to the hospital, even if that is the only allegation contained within the complaint.
Okay, a few questions on retention. What is the salary range for your investigator levels? Is the salary range a main reason why investigators leave the CCRB, and also will the budget request address the salary issue?
The budget request would address the salary issue because it would budget investigator salaries at level 3 incumbent rate, which means that we would be able to promote people in a timely way when they are deserving of promotion, so that we could better retain them. Currently, the starting salary for a level 1 investigator is $49,148. For a level 2 investigator, $58,000. And then for a level 3 investigator who is an incumbent, $80,469.
All right, a few questions about body-worn camera footage. How many hours of footage were collected by CCRB in FY25, and how has this affected the timeline of investigations? Also, what is the biggest cause for the increased time to complete an investigation? Lack of investigators, anything else, any other factors?
So I'm going to deal with the body-worn camera question first. In 2025, the CCRB requested 3,010, made 3,010 requests for body-worn camera footage. As a result, we received 2,430 positive responses with 25,818 videos. The average positive response time by the NYPD for unredacted videos is 8 business days. I'm sorry, is 8 calendar days. With regard to the second, Mr. Chair, if you could repeat the second part of the question.
Yeah, sorry, I asked like 5 questions at once. What is the biggest cause for the increased time to complete an investigation?
So interestingly, we've been able to shave investigation times slightly in recent years. We're down to 430 days to complete a fully investigated complaint, but by far the biggest driver in the increase is the increased number of complaints combined with the lack of investigators, which is why we need more investigators so that we can spread the work out among different individuals so they can do the work faster.
Yeah, 430 days just to complete an investigation, that's a very long time. Yeah, do you project all investigations will be completed within the previous target time frame of 120 days if we're able to provide this new funding? Or do you foresee any obstacles?
So one of the obstacles would be if the board is not fully staffed. The board itself right now has 4 vacancies, which is separate from the issue of staffing. And that will be a bottleneck even if the staffing request is fully met.
All right, thank you for the information. I have some more questions, but I'll pause for now. I'll pass it on to Councilmember Caban stepped out briefly, so I'll pass it on to Councilmember Wong. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start my questions, could you explain? Could you move up your mic because so we could better hear you? Yeah, move it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, Councilmember.
No problem. I read here that your agency has the power to initiate investigations without having to receive a complaint. So where do you investigate then if there's no complaint? Who do you investigate?
So the CCRB has a process in place to evaluate essentially news to see if there is an incident that we should investigate. Sometimes there are fatalities that result in no one being available to file a complaint. Since the CCRB has been given the power, we have not used it. One of the reasons for that is that we're closing more than 1,000 complaints a year because we don't have the resources to investigate complaints that we receive from the people of the city. It would not be fair to them that we're investigating other incidents without investigating the complaints that they filed.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I'm going to start with my questions. Accountability is important, but it has to be fair, timely, and grounded in facts, not ideology. And many of my constituents, and many of them are officers, feel that CCRB is quicker to assume misconduct than to recognize how complex and dangerous policing can be, especially in high crime or high tension situations. How do you respond to the criticism from officers and many in the public that CCRB often assumes misconduct first and asks questions later, especially in high profile or politically charged cases?
So I think you just need to look at the statistics to see that the CCRB is not substantiating complaints at an abnormally high level. What you have seen is that the rate of substantiated complaints for fully investigated cases has gone up, but it has also gone up for unfounded complaints and within guideline complaints. And the reason those three categories have increased is because the category of unable to determine has gone down. And the reason we are able to make determinations on the merits in so many more cases is because body-worn cameras. The police commissioner testified earlier today about how important body-worn cameras are to policing and civilian oversight. And she is correct. And they make a huge difference. And if you look at the actual data that the CCRB produces, the vast majority of officers who are investigated, we do not substantiate misconduct against them.
Okay. My next question is, when NYPD's internal review clears an officer, but CCRB reaches a different conclusion, what objective standard do you use to justify overriding the judgment of the chain of command that actually runs the department?
The reason the CCRB was made an independent civilian entity is because it was determined that there should be independent civilian oversight of the NYPD. That's why the police commissioner herself is a civilian. The CCRB, can I finish?
Conclude, and you could take time for another question or two.
The CCRB is an independent entity, and we are going to come up with different conclusions than the NYPD sometimes. But if you look at what has happened since Commissioner Tisch has become police commissioner, there is concurrence between the NYPD and the CCRB about discipline matters at an extremely high rate. Where there is disagreement, there is friction. It is at times frustrating, and I could see why, if you are a member of the NYPD, you would be frustrated by it. But that is a healthy tension that shows there is actual independence for my agency.
Okay. Now, your investigations often take more than a year. Now, in the meantime, the officers' careers, promotions, and reputations are on hold. So why should we expand CCRB's budget before it demonstrates that it can resolve cases faster and more consistently with the resources it already has?
So I think the agency has shown it is committed to finding efficiencies and reducing investigation times, and the numbers in the PMMR show that the best way to reduce investigation times is to grant the budget requests so that we could hire more investigators and complete our investigations faster.
Okay, Chair, do I have more time for another question? Thank you, yeah. All right, when an officer is fully clear, what is your position on sealing the CCRB case records so the unfounded allegations do not shadow that officer's career forever online?
So the CCRB is our records are governed by the Freedom of Information law in New York State, and we evaluate all of the requests we get for information and all of the information that we publish based on the Freedom of Information law. There are exceptions for privacy rights of individuals, and we evaluate every request and every piece of data we publish to make sure that the privacy rights of individual members of service are respected. I recently had a conversation with our general counsel, and we are making sure that our FOIL unit is reviewing cases, is reviewing requests and what we are putting online to make sure that we are not inappropriately, unfairly disparaging members of service and their reputations with the information we publish.
Okay, do you feel CCRB's work has actually improved public safety?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. A few questions on staffing. So obviously when we have staffing issues, that creates a lot of challenges in terms of the cases that you're not able to get to. So due to the staffing issues, what are the issues that you've prioritized and what are issues that you've had to somewhat put to the side given that you don't have enough staff to handle?
So really the strategic resource allocation determination, Mr. Chair, that is the policy we created to show our prioritization. And the fact that we, after the council and the prior administration increased the headcount, took forcible removal to the hospital, as that was our first allegation that we removed from the policy, shows that we are committed to investigating complaints about improper removal to the hospital. But we try to address complaints in order of the importance of the severity of the injury to the civilian and the interest that the council and prior administrations have shown in the different types of misconduct.
Okay. In the first 4 months of fiscal year 2026, the board received about 2,095 complaints, a slight increase from fiscal year 2025. What units in the NYPD generate the most complaints?
You know what, Mr. Chair, I should know that, but I don't, and I'll get it back to you.
Or what are issues that you consistently see or have seen this past year?
Excessive force is a common allegation. Discourtesy. In the abuse of authority category, we get, now that we are investigating racial profiling, bias-based policing, we have a sizable number of those complaints. We also just have stop, question, and frisk, improper car stops, allegations such as that.
What are some examples of excessive force that you've seen? And obviously investigating, so you don't need to get into the details or provide super specifics, but if you could give us some general idea of what exactly are the general excessive force cases.
So excessive force can vary from seemingly very minor, which is the amount of force used while trying to effectuate an arrest, to extremely serious, such as the use of a firearm or a taser. And we use the standards of the patrol guide and the law to evaluate all allegations of misconduct, whether force or abuse of authority, discourtesy, offensive language.
Okay. From the PMMR, we saw the preliminary mayor's management report. We saw that the rate of officers disciplined jumped substantially from 29% in the first 4 months of FY25 to 93% in the first 4 months of FY26. So just wondering, how has it been working with the current police commissioner on this issue of discipline, and how does that compare to previous commissioners?
So I just want to say the first thing with regard to discipline that Commissioner Tisch did was reverse the department's prior policy of rejecting all substantiated CCRB complaints that resulted in discipline that they received more than 90 business days from the expiration of the statute of limitations. Or not more, less than 90 business days. It's like 4 months. that her reversing that policy enables the department to actually look at the complaints that we're sending to them, look at those recommendations for discipline, and then determine whether the CCRB is right or wrong. And I think by her making the decision to invest the department's time and attention into these matters has made a substantial change and a substantial impact on how the CCRB, how the NYPD is treating CCRB recommendations of discipline.
All right, thank you for the information. I'll pass it on to Councilmember Nurse for some questions.
I might have fully forgot what I wanted to say, but in the earlier testimony from the police commissioner, she noted that she was aligned with the CCRB's ruling for 90% of the cases that she took on. And I just wanted to, we didn't get a data number on how many were recommended for to be taken on versus how many were taken on. Sorry, it's been a long day trying to make intelligence sentences.
Councilmember, I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay,
Are you
great.
asking how many?
How many cases did you recommend move forward for discipline? Because she's saying 90% of the cases that she picked up to move forward with discipline, she was in alignment with, but how many? I'm trying to understand what the pool of that
So
is.
part of the problem is it's not apples to apples.
Okay.
Because the discipline process unfortunately takes too long. And so there are complaints that the CCRB closed in 2024 that are still open now.
Okay.
Right? There are frankly a few very old cases involving incidents that happened 8-9 years ago. So it is tough to give you the number you're
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah.
But what the police commissioner testified to is accurate in the cases that are getting to her desk. So like they have gone through the CCRB's process and then gone through the department's internal discipline process. She is agreeing with the CCRB close to 90% of the time.
But in relationship to what you all have in the pipeline, slow dripping down there, it's what, like a tiny, it's a small amount? Like it's a sizable amount?
So there is a sizable amount, I would say approximately 500 cases in the administrative prosecution unit that have not been disposed of. There is either needs to be a trial or a plea in those cases. The administrative prosecution unit has worked very hard to try or resolve. So either have the administrative proceeding or have a plea to resolve cases. And and the numbers have gone way up in terms of dispositions in the APU as a result of, number one, the increase in staffing that the APU received, but also movements in the department advocate's office and by the administrative prosecution unit to make the process more efficient.
So we're making progress, but we got a long way to go.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right, anyone else has any other questions? Councilmember Wong. Okay, cool, sounds good. All right, well, thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate your testimony and all the information, also all the work that you do on the important issues that you work on.
On behalf of the staff and board, I just wanted to say thank you for listening.
Thank you. All right, now we'll hear from the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, MOCJ, the Mayor's Office that focuses on many issues, including resources for individuals that are incarcerated, and also reentry programs, and also general violence interruption. We'll hear from Deanna Logan, Nora Daniel, Candice Julian, and Robert Fiato. I'll pass it to the committee clerk for some procedural items.
Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council members' questions?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin.
First, I want to say thank you for having us, and good afternoon, Chair Felice and Councilmember Nurse. We know it's been a really long day for all of you, so we are grateful for your stamina and for your attention. Chair Felice and members of the council, it's my pleasure to be here today. My name is Deanna Logan, and I am the director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, which we affectionately call MOCJ. At the heart of MOCJ's work is, in fact, the ability to work towards making New York City a fairer and safer place for all. Every program that we operate, every partnership we build, and every single one of your dollars that you give us is invested in making sure and guiding a clear goal of communities safer, stronger, and using public dollars wisely. Our office is focused on addressing not just criminal legal system, but also the underlying issues driving that system involvement. When we invest in people thoughtfully, strategically, and guided by data, we generate real return on that investment. Programs that connect people to services, put roofs over their heads, help them rebuild their lives, and stabilize families and neighborhoods ultimately cost a fraction of what it takes to incarcerate someone on Rikers, and our outcomes are far better. Through initiatives like supervised release, alternatives to incarceration, and the Community Justice Reentry Network, we're keeping thousands of people out of jail every year. This is what it looks like when government works for New Yorkers. You may have heard me say recently that public health is public safety, and a core part of our strategy is recognizing that our public health and public safety systems have symbiotic relationships. And research is our foundation. We studied the patterns associated with people who are at heightened risk of entering into the criminal legal system and having that ongoing involvement. What did we learn? Many people who are cycling through the legal system are navigating complex, multiple combination of challenges: housing instability, trauma, untreated mental health needs, substance use disorder, and economic hardships. Addressing only one of those challenges at a time doesn't work. This is why we still have gaps in our safety nets. Addressing all of those challenges together does work to close those gaps. And we are now filling in those gaps by coordinating and collaborating continuously with our partners at the New York City Department of Correction, the New York City Department of Probation, the city's health agencies, our district attorney's offices, our indigent defense providers, and a host of great community partners. That coordination is paying dividends. MOCJ is committed to strengthening the pipeline connecting people leaving custody to transitional housing, job training, mental health services, and community-based mentorship. Our expansion of emergency transitional housing is an especially critical component. With more than 100 beds coming online in the upcoming months to give more New Yorkers a stable place to lay their head during the vulnerable period of rebuilding their life. We are also strengthening workforce development. Of course, training is key, And that has been a heart of all of the programmatic work that deals with workforce. But people need to be equipped with skills to do the job, and we know that. However, connecting the skilled person with the employer is critical. We're investing in programs that include placement services and employer partnerships and sustained career pathways so participants can achieve the financial stability needed to support their families. Thank you to second chance employers that understand lived experience and the trauma that accompanies it, and who provide not only opportunity, but grace and space as formerly incarcerated people acclimate to the work environment. When people have meaningful work and stable housing, they are less likely to return to the criminal legal system, benefiting entire communities. If you indulge me for a quick story, and I know we've been here a while and there's more people after me, but I wanna kind of explain to you what we see. I recently had the opportunity to sit down in a healing circle, and you heard earlier from DA Gonzalez about the Project Restore project. That started as a pilot, and thank you to City Council and funding for making it baseline for Brooklyn. But I got to sit down with a number of the participants from that Project Restore that MOCJ helped start the pilot. And that was the collaboration with the Brooklyn DA's office. Mayor's Office of Mental Health and Bed-Stuy also came in to work on that. And we often ask ourselves, what does public safety look like? What does it sound like? And honestly, sitting down in that healing circle, that's what public safety looks like and sounds like. It sounds like 10 young men from Bed-Stuy, all with verified history of gun and gang involvement, working out their trauma to build better lives for themselves. Now, these men I met first about 2+ years ago when they were each in rival street crews, sitting next to their former rivals. Now they're friends collaborating on community safety and mental health initiatives. They talked about the families, that they're now supporting, the degrees that they are getting, the careers that they are starting and pursuing, because they had the support to break a cycle, the cycle that continues to push them towards the criminal legal system. Most importantly, they discussed why these types of programming, why that type of work with Project Restore should be the reality for all and not just a lucky few. And that's what safety looks like for all of us. Look, at the same time, we are clear-eyed about the challenges ahead. Our jail population climbed in recent years, so we still have a lot of work to do. We have investments to make to safely reduce the jail population while maintaining accountability and public trust. The path forward is clear. The solutions that work are the ones grounded in research, coordination across systems, and absolutely investments in people. That means continuing to strengthen programs like supervised release, alternatives to incarceration, and the Community Justice Reentry Network, programs that help people stabilize their lives. Simply put, investing in people is one of the smartest public safety strategies that we have. It strengthens neighborhoods, reduces reliance on incarceration, and delivers a strong return on public dollars. Thank you, council members, for your commitment to building a stronger and fairer, safer New York. I look forward to continuing our partnership, and we, the MOCJ team, are open for questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for the work that you do on the issue of criminal justice. A few questions regarding new needs. There's $26 million that is baselined in this plan for hate crime prevention. Which services and programs will see the increases through this funding?
Currently, that money is in the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes, and the plan is to look at the current personnel programming that that portfolio does and expand it.
What's the total budget of that Office of Hate Crime Prevention, and also what's their head count?
For that, I'll give our CFO.
Yes, thank you for the question, Chair. The total budget for the OPHC, the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes, is $3 million. That's an OTPS, and there are 3 authorized full-time personnel assigned to that office.
Is the $26 million intended to be used citywide or specific boroughs that are facing specific issues?
That office is citywide, so that's citywide funding.
Few questions about reentry and ATI programs, alternatives to incarceration programs. What are programs that you've seen as most successful, and how many does your office serve on that issue?
Thank you for your question. So our ATI programs we have generally seen success with them. For the most part, people who enter them are well matched. Most people who enter into ATI programs are not rearrested. And so we have seen success with those programs. They serve about 9,000 people a year for ATIs. For reentry, it's about 4,000.
9,000 and 4,000. And could you give us some specifics on those programs? What exactly are things that they provide?
Sure. So reentry services are intended to be comprehensive. And so our providers do discharge planning inside of Rikers, and then also in community services. So people are able to get connected to mental health care. They're able to get connected to services. Our case managers are pretty comprehensive about what they're able to connect people to, even though we do know that there continue to be gaps for people with higher needs.
Okay, a few questions about the Rikers population. As you know, one of the prime drivers of the inflation of the Rikers population is the long delays and the extreme length of time criminal cases take to resolve. What are steps that MOCJ is taking to reduce the amount of time that criminal cases take?
Thank you for the question. There are a couple of steps. So first and foremost, MOCJ is looking at all of the criminal legal system as a whole. First and foremost, it is ensuring that the programs that do not have people going into Rikers are able and ready for the capacity to support people. So the project resets, the ways that we look at those individuals who have a persistent pattern that we are consistently engaging with, so that they break that cycle of coming back in, where you would see them going into Rikers because now they have accumulated cases and they fall into that harm and harm, right? So the trajectory is usually them increasing, and what we're looking to do with our intensive case management program is identifying those individuals sooner and truncating the arc of them repeating and coming back into the system by connecting them sooner in the process to the services that would then stop them from going into the system in the first place.
And what are steps that MOCJ is taking to ensure that the NYPD is providing evidence in a timely way?
Ooh, that's a big ask. So we work with NYPD, we work with the DA's offices, and we have looked at the ability to provide discovery across the city. One of the areas that we worked on very closely with NYPD and with the DAs is just the ability to make sure that the systems actually spoke to one another, right? Our first deputy director was crucial in navigating the acronym is API, and my public affairs guys is going to kill me because I use the acronym, but it really is the bridge that delivers the information from PD systems to DA systems. And given that there are 5 of the electeds, as well as special narcotics, it was a feat to make sure that that bridge stayed open with the vendor that PD was using, so that we could ensure that there was no gap and that there was no elongating of the time. As they told you earlier, each one of them building their own systems has had the issues we see whenever we're rolling out new technology across. There have been challenges and delays, but they're actively working on it, and we've been actively working with all of them to navigate some of the places where we have to make sure that the vendors meet the goals for the city, meaning the DAs and NYPD and the defenders alike.
All right, and final question before I pass it on to colleagues. Question about ATI and reentry services. The preliminary budget includes a 1.3 and 3.3 cut to ATI programming and reentry services. Do we think that it is wise to cut these services? I think the answer to that is no. Are we taking steps to make some restorations?
So we continue to work with OMB to ensure that we have the appropriate level of services for ATI and reentry.
Okay. Have you started those conversations yet, or?
We're continuing to work with them on it, yes.
Okay. So I'll pause here. I'll pass it on to Councilmember Nurse for some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good to see you all. I have questions, I promise. Local Law 139 mandates MOCJ ensure that when assessment is required for acceptance to a court-based alternative to incarceration program, a holistic clinical assessment shall be completed within 3 weeks or 6 weeks for more complicated cases. We know that the legal mandate just took effect in February. Kind of what are you all, how are things going? Are we hitting those timelines? Is there capacity for it?
It's a little early to provide specifics. However, the program is funded. CJI has received the funding for it, and they are currently working to staff up.
And how long do assessments take on average now?
I would have to get that number for you. I know it varies depending on how complicated the case is.
Would it be fair to say longer than 6 weeks normally?
Without additional resources, yes, it can take.
Okay. And who will be providing the assessments, just for the record?
So we're working through CJI, but it will be their clinical assessments, so it will be clinical staff who will be doing that.
Okay. And then for a supervised release, which we've talked about a bunch over the last couple of years, we see the preliminary budget is cutting funding for it by $4.5 million. And do you know where those cuts are going to be made, to what parts of the program?
So we're continuing to work with OMB on looking at the numbers for SRP over the past year and over years past, just to see where those numbers lay and determining the right level for it.
Okay. Do you know if any of those cuts will be made to some of the intensive case management program?
We do not have that information as of yet.
Okay. Yeah, I would just say that that is, something we've all been advocating for, especially to safely bring down the jail population and obviously reduce violence and get people out who might not necessarily need to be there, but might need some extra eyes and ears. So hopefully we can make sure that the case management is sustained and that we're able to get people out and continue to bring down the jail population. And quickly on Harbor House, there's over 100 beds and a month-long waiting list. Do you have any plans to grow the number of residential treatment beds for people with dual diagnoses?
That is a clear gap that we have seen in services, and it is something we're continuing to work on to figure out exactly what the gap is and what that looks like long-term.
But no plans, nothing in this plan for additional beds?
Not currently.
Okay. From what we've been told, it sounds like there's space to add 50 beds, which would cost about roughly $3 million to kind of outfit the space. Is that your understanding?
We have heard that from partners, yes.
Okay. Okay. And then I saw that you're adding, from your testimony, 100 beds. That's for the transitional emergency housing? Okay,
Yes, it is.
that's great. I think that's, and do we know where that, sorry, what borough will that be, or is that just across the board?
We're looking at a few different boroughs. We're looking in Queens and also in Brooklyn and possibly the Bronx.
Okay, but, and you don't have the distribution yet, though?
We don't have the exact distribution yet.
Okay. One other,
I know, but you was that about to just now, and that's what you said, Queen.
oh, I guess people are joining us virtually, but I have one more question. For the local law 92
Like, you know where to go and stuff, right?
That's why I didn't even come out with like.
Sergeant,
All right, please,
Can you help
let's
me out?
mute all the Zooms.
Pick up his glasses. I told you it's just one in C Nick.
Yeah, but that shit closed at like 6 o'clock.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's why I asked him. what
Please,
time was it?
please mute yourself if you're on Zoom.
hopefully they'll make it by 6. Local Law 92 from 2023, there was a resource navigator program for women, transgender, intersex, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. Is this resource navigator program fully operational and fulfilling its mandate?
We do have within our reentry services resource navigation, and then also we have on our website the ability to go in and search for those services, yes.
Okay. And what budget line item is this program included under?
I think we were able to do it in a budget neutral way.
I'm sorry, can you bring the mic a little bit closer?
Sorry.
I'm
I'll turn
going
it over
deaf
to our CFO.
in my age.
I believe the budget item is included under our reentry budget.
Under reentry? Okay. Okay. Those are my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A few more questions. A question about the intensive case management pilot. This is a pretrial supervised release program that provides caseworkers to those who check in and also offer services and provide reminders of people of their court dates and other things. Does the preliminary budget include funding to expand on this? Or is that something that there's a planned cut on that program?
Chair, currently the funding is maintained for fiscal year '26 at $9 million. There is not out-year funding at the moment, but we continue to work with OMB to assess the program needs and the fiscal needs to continue the program.
All right, similar question, but I guess on the issue of district attorneys, what steps is MOCJ taking to ensure that district attorneys and defenders have installed technology so they can process, store, and share evidence efficiently? And also the state approved $50 million for this 2 years ago. Do we have any information on when this will be installed and finalized?
So in working with the DAs, we talk to them about needs and where they are with the discovery. The discovery funding that the state provided went directly to the district attorneys, and so they managed what they spent those funds on in terms of the technology and their infrastructure bills. Given that each office has its own separate infrastructure, it's our understanding that they're in different places and that they are diligently working to get to a place of having their systems completed. But we understand that the Bronx started sooner with one of the vendors and may be in a better place to be moving through what the technology looks like. The Queens had its own internal database system that it was building out. Manhattan also has a good infrastructure system that it was building out. Staten Island was using a product that was on the state level, be used by other prosecutors across New York State. And Brooklyn also is looking at building up its infrastructure. So each one of them is in a different place, and we continuously work with them, as well as the Corporation Council, where there may be challenges with contracting to ensure that their resources are being appropriately dedicated towards the technology builds, and any challenges are addressed.
All right, and last question for me. Can you talk to us about some of the criminal justice housing related programs that you have? I know you provide transitional housing for those exiting Rikers. Can you talk about those housing programs a little bit?
Sure. It's our emergency and transitional housing program. We work with 3 providers to implement that program. It's Fortune Society, Housing Works, and Housing Plus, which is a consortium for women. And we have about 800 beds open now, and we're planning for about 150 more over the next year.
All right, thank you so much. Anyone else has any other questions? All right, so I think this concludes this part of the, actually, Councilmember Wong has.
I'll squeeze in the question. Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
I noticed that you offer services for defendants as well as services for victims. Is that right?
Got it. All right, cool.
No, I'm wrong.
Not quite. We do have some services for victims, yes.
So how do you balance it? Because they seem to be, conflicting goals.
Well, most of the contracts for victim services sit with HRA now. However, we believe that the criminal justice system the criminal legal system is a continuum, and everybody needs to, when we're looking at public safety, it helps us both to ensure that victims have what they need, and then ensure that people are less likely to re-enter the system. So that's how we sort of balance the concept.
Thank you, Councilmember Wong. And I also want to just highlight the fact that we our community courts deal a lot of work with restorative justice. So that means that instead of looking at a punitive model, meaning you did something bad and so now we're going to